Welcome to Cornelia Street. Is there anybody who hasn't been here before? Oh my God. As Her Majesty would say if she were here, it's a shunder. Anyhow, some of you have been with us almost from day one. And what we thought we would do is celebrate really this afternoon the long tradition of songwriting that began here almost from day one. There was a young woman, Carolyn Mars, who lived next door, and she would sit in our little doorway with her dog, and then she would play, at night she'd play piano around the corner, and sometimes when we were closing I would go around the corner and listen to her. I was the only person in that bar who actually listened. This is called a listening room, I understand. People pay attention. How amazing. Anyhow, Carolyn was playing the piano and singing songs of hers, songs by friends of hers, and so on. And then she said one day, you know, I have these friends, and we're looking for a place to sort of play new material once a week. So that's how the Songwriters Exchange got born upstairs in our little one room. And every Monday night, it's actually interesting, Rob McDonald sometimes refers to this with gratitude, that the owner, namely me, would tell everybody to shut up because someone was singing. And what was wonderful about that experience was dozens of songwriters emerged out of that. Some came from other parts of the country, and you'll see at least two of them tonight. And in 1980, Stash Records issued, Stash was a jazz label, and it issued its only non-jazz record. Records were around things with little grooves. It was called Cornelia Street, the Songwriters Exchange. There were two further iterations of that. And David and Cliff will probably remember, or have probably tried to forget, that we managed to record 12 different artists. Each got an hour and squeezed as many songs in as they could in that hour at Mike Lobel's studio in New Jersey. And we started at 9 in the morning and finished at 3 the next morning. Anyhow, the album still sounds fresh. It's amazing. It's acoustic, it's lovely, and you will see or hear maybe some of those songs today. I thought I would begin with a tiny little introduction. We've been at it for 41 and a half years. Just in terms of figures, we now do 700 shows a year down here, at least. Actually, this year it will be 2, 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock. So yeah, I usually say let's hear it for quantity, but I think tonight we will be surprised by the range and quality of what has sort of emerged upstairs, downstairs, and in my lady's chamber, from more than 40 years of songwriters coming in and singing quite wonderful stuff. There is a little book of cafe stories which we published for our 40th anniversary. It takes, this is volume 1 of what will be Encyclopedia Cornelia. This gets you through the first 10 days. It's actually true, it takes you to the blackout of 1977. But in it, there are some lovely drawings by a young woman called Pat Preble, who hung out here in the very early days of the cafe sketching. And then she went off to California after about 4 years. I didn't hear from her in more than 35 years. And then one day a book arrives in the mail called I'll Have a Cappuccino, Please, the Cornelia Street Cafe drawings. So interspersed between these stories are some of her lovely drawings from the very early days. And I'm going to read the opening story of this book, which is an amuse-bouche, sort of. It's called Stanley, and some of you have been had this inflicted on you before, so don't give it away. Stanley. Oh, I should say the book is called The Whole World Passes Through Stories from the Cornelia Street Cafe. Stanley. One night a man I knew as Stanley, tall, elegant, tanned, trim, dressed in an expensive sport coat and an open-necked shirt, white-haired, clean-shaven, a former American tennis champion who now made his home in Kenya, remarked to me over our little espresso bar, "You know, there's a place like this in Nairobi. You never know who's going to be there. You just know when you walk in that somebody's going to be there. Someone you know from a former life, a different continent, another galaxy. A pal, an acquaintance, a lover, a movie star. Someone you know, or someone you knew, or someone you don't know yet, but you will. Someone you may spend the night with, carousing, or the rest of your life. And you go away and you come back 100 times, 1,000 times, and it's always the same. But if you stick around, which maybe a handful of people do, sooner or later, the whole world passes through." I told this story to my friend Howard once in London, and he said, "Oh yes, I know that place." Stanley would show up intermittently, passing through from Africa on his way to some Masters tournament in Florida or Hawaii or Mexico or on Long Island. He invariably had on his arm a woman of a certain age, a different woman each time, not interchangeable by any means, but with certain attributes one had come to expect. Elegant, tanned, not so trim, with expensively dressed, wonderfully coiffured, with just enough jewelry, perfume, and joie de vivre to make the air around her moist with anticipation. There was an ease and buoyancy about Stanley and his serial companions which was contagious. I always felt the cafe elevated by their presence. He may have been a gigolo, but he was a superb gigolo. I haven't seen Stanley in almost 40 years. But he could walk in tomorrow, put an elbow on the bar, which is a real bar now, and say, "So Robin, how's it been? Have you met my friend?" And he would turn his head and extend his arm and step discreetly aside, and over the bar would glide a gloved hand and a bare arm attached to a beautiful, if no longer youthful, shoulder. And above the shoulder would be a choker with a single large stone caught at the throat, and above the throat a handsome face of a certain age. And the face, unknown and yet somehow familiar, would burst into a brilliant smile, and eyes of a certain age would look at me appraisingly, and a voice, aged in oak barrels, distilled with cigarette smoke and many complicated affairs of the heart, would murmur, "Finally, I've heard so much about you." Well, that's what I imagine. And Stanley would say, "You know, there's a bar like this in Nairobi if you stick around long enough." And his companion would look at me and take in the whole cafe and finish this sentence for him: "The whole world passes through." So that's Stanley. And it's really by way of saying that in miniature, the whole world will pass through today. Every songwriter ever born is about to appear on the stage. Some have come in from quite a long way away.